Hello everyone, welcome back to Cryo Cannoning. This is going to be part 2 of a 4-part series where we make ourselves a nice 120 stacker. So if you didn't see the previous episode, we made this sand compression, and you may be wondering, well, why do I make the sand compression first? Why not make the power that it shoots out first? And the answer is that the power only really has two components. It has the booster and it has like the actual power itself. Mainly the booster, we're not too worried about the power. So one major component. However, in the sand comp, we've got boosters, we've got all these timings over here for the sand, the drop, pretty much yeah, a few boosters we have to worry about. So why basically, my reasoning is why go to the trouble of making the power and then building your sand compression around the power timings when you can save yourself a lot of hassle just building your power around the sand compression timings. Because after all, the sand comps, what's going to be firing off first in your cannon? Because that's what's going to be hitting the wall first. And I'll go into how our cannon will actually function very shortly. So yeah, taking from where we left off, if we have a look just here, we managed to get it compressing very nicely into this web, just like that. So I've changed nothing since then. That was just a visual glitch. I've changed nothing since then, and yeah, it's working quite nicely. So if I go ahead and pick this up, 56 plus 64 is 120. So that's perfect. So now we need to find a suitable layout for our cannon for the rest of the components. So typically in a cannon we're going to have our nuke in with our sand comp. Again, I'll explain why a bit later, and we're going to have that coming in just on top of this ladder. That's why I've left this gap here. So our nuke's going to come out the side here, just like so. It's going to come in from this general direction out here. Then as we make our way over, we're going to have our hammer coming in from the left here. We could, the reason it's coming in from the left is because our power is going to be coming in, uh, in this direction, because we're going to be shooting north. So you'll see what I mean. So to get the ideal distance between our scene comp and our power or barrel, I like to map it out. So with if we just go off where our hammer's going to be next to our sand comp, we want to leave a 1 block space in between. So this is how I like to remember it. Based on my powering technique, it goes redstone, then redstone repeater, then our dispenser, and then we've got our gap here. So that means that we want our ladder to be where this gap is, because that's where our TNT is going to shoot into. What that also means is we can um, get quite an effective exposure just here and save a lot of TNT. So now that we've mapped out where our hammer's coming in, let's go and think about where the rest of it's going to go, especially our barrel. So for this type of cannon, we're going to be looking at a trapdoor barrel. We're not going to be looking at anything as complex as a stair barrel just yet, even though they do have quite a few benefits. So let's see if I can remember how to make this. We're actually going to have to move this one back. Bear with me, I haven't made a stair barrel in a while. So yeah, we're going to have our sand hitting this, trapdoor barrel, my bad. Going to have the sand hitting this trapdoor, just like that. So let's go ahead and design this. Something like this will be fine. Our TNT is going to come in and hit this block, and that's what we're really aiming for here. So let's go ahead and actually let's move it even one more over, just like so. So now we've got quite a nice little setup here. Um, so yep, this is where our shot's going to be coming in from. I like to just enclose it a little bit, make it look a little bit better. So as you can see, our sand renders up and then out, as we've talked about a little bit with the triangling mechanic. So that means it's going to be hitting the top of this trapdoor, which is what we want. So let's get this to fire out now. And before I finish this power, I'm going to have to explain how this type of cannon actually works, so you guys all have a good understanding. So before these new types of cannons, these fusion cannons came about, there was just a regular fission cannon. I think that's what they called it. I don't even remember. I wasn't around then. But basically how it worked was you would have your TNT with that mechanic I talked about where it goes up and out. You would have your sand on a lower guider. That's this block here, which guides the sand out of the barrel. You would have that on a lower guider than your hammer. And so when you've got a power TNT behind it, that's actually going to shoot this at a wall such that the TNT is rendering above the sand. And what's that going to do? Well, it's going to make it stack, which is our objective. Um, there was a few problems with this though. For instance, a base defense came about where what happens if you have a situation like this? Well, your TNT, because it's one block higher than your sand, is going to hit this block here, and then your sand's actually going to fly underneath, and so your hammer's going to clip. And this was quite a big defense back a few years ago now, and we had to find a way around that. So what Canon has started doing was what we call fusioning, where your sand and your hammer is on the same exposure. What do I mean by exposure? Well, they're the same distance apart from your power. So how can you do this? How can you get sand and TNT on the same exposure? Well, if you have two pieces of TNT ticking off, let's say you've got our first power, let's call it power 1, and our second power, power 2, and this is going to be ticking, power 2 is going to be ticking 2 ticks after power 1. What this means is that our TNT can come in into the barrel. Our sand will be first. It's going to come into the barrel. Our first power is going to go off, and our sand is going to shoot out at whatever we're shooting at. There'll be a guider there, obviously, and it's going to hit the wall. So this is in, let's call this game tick. Let's call this game tick 1 or tick 1. Our sand comes out and hits the wall. Well, that means our power 1 has been used up. 2 ticks later, our power 2 is going to blow up. And so if our power 2 blows up and it's shooting our hammer, it's going to shoot the hammer the same exposure, which is what we just talked about with the fusioning, and the same direction. However, because it's 2 ticks later, our sand has now fallen by 1 block. So now, this is your setup. This looks pretty familiar. We just went over it with um, this setup from a few years ago. So that looks the same, except now your shot's coming in at the same Y level. It's not, the sand's not going underneath, which means these old style defenses are basically useless. And yes, that's another benefit. We can also do a lot more with this style of cannoning. We can get our power TNT much closer to our sand and our hammer TNT, which is what we want. And for you guys who are new, a hammer TNT is basically a certain amount of TNT that is used to stack your sand. Because as you'll see soon, our sand doesn't hit the wall and just stack magically. We've actually got to make that happen. So yeah, let's get on with the power. Um, since we now have discovered that we're going to need two powers, two ticks apart, we can go ahead and do that quite easily. So you're going to see me use this infinite booster setup again. I think it's definitely one of my favorites. I like to leave maybe 3 trapdoors just here. Uh, and you can have as much power as you want. It really doesn't matter. Let's go with something like this for now. Obviously, the more power you add, the further it's going to shoot. It doesn't take a genius to work that one out. And also another impact is the exposure. So if I have our power TNT here, and then I have my sand or my hammer way over here, it's not going to shoot as far, logically, because this TNT isn't in close proximity to it. However, if I have it here, it's going to shoot a lot further, which is the benefit of a trapdoor barrel. So let's keep moving. So going to have a setup like this. Something like this will be more than adequate. I'm just designing the little booster area, and I like to stack my glass. I'm guessing 17, that looks good. 17, just like so. Also, we're actually going to need 2 trapdoors just here, because sometimes our hammer might come in and might um, triangle into our power, which I've had problems with before, so I just recommend doing that. And yeah, let's go ahead and use dispensers. I like to leave a 1 block gap here just because, I don't know, maybe it's just my preference, but I don't like the look of that. I don't think it boosts it to where it needs to go. So I'm going to leave a gap here. See, so that's 15, 16, 17 long. That's 34. If we stack this 10 up, that's going to be 340 power, which should be all we really need. 9 up for this demonstration. You can go as high as 14. You can stack it up twice if you want and then just carry a redstone signal up. It really doesn't matter. But for just this video, we'll make it nice and small. And yep, so I'm going to be wiring my power up like this. If you don't know what um, a glowstone block does, it's kind of like a slab. So redstone signal can travel up it, but it can't go down it, which makes it quite useful. If you're good with World Edit, you can do this a lot quicker. And once again, we've got a server restart. And what are the odds? So yeah, I'll be back with you as soon as the server is restarted. Righty, so we are back. Haven't done anything extra, as you can see. Server just restarted, so hopefully it won't restart for a while. We're going to stack this 3 blocks up. If you want me to do like a little world edit video explaining how to use it efficiently, I can do that as well. It's really it just makes it that much quicker. But you can probably look off the commands I'm typing in here if you need to. Okay, so there's our 2 powers. Um, so 340 will be the total power, so we can actually check how much we've got. If you don't trust your math, you can check it. 340. So because we've got 2 power pulses, it's actually only going to be 170 on each side because of that fusion idea we discussed. We want to go ahead and wire this up. Our power is 17 blocks long. a redstone signal is only it's only 15, so we need to account for this, and we can do that really easily just by this. Something as simple as this will work quite nicely, and it doesn't look half bad either. Okay, so let's have our left side going off 2 ticks after our right side. And yep, how are we going to get a redstone signal up here? We can do something like this, just like that, and that works quite nicely. No, that's fine. Okay, so we've got our power. So if we go ahead and fire this, hang on, before we fire this, I might actually add some extra delay. I'm going to put this on 4 and this one on 4 as well. And the reason is we have, not counting this repeater, we have 1, 2 ticks. If we have a button here, we have 2 ticks going for the boosters. Then we have 1, 2, 3, 7. Before it was on 1, so that would have been 4. So we want a good little bit of difference between these two. So we can actually go ahead and test this now. Just our power. So yeah, let's go ahead. Should notice it's going to compress quite nicely. And you could hear the double blow up just then. So that's perfect. So now what we have to do is link these two together. And how are we going to do that? Well, a good rule of thumb I like to do is I like to have my sand comp booster going off 2 ticks before the power booster. You can have it 1 tick before, and I'm sure it's actually slightly better if you want to adjust further upwards. But for me, I like to go 2. So let's count, shall we, from the button. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 8 is 13. And I'm actually going to move this slightly. Is 13. Okay, so 13 going into our booster, which means our first power, our sand comp power, as we've discussed, has to go off before the hammer. So if that's on 13, this is going to have to be on 15. So 1, 2, 6, 7, that's 7, 13 minus 15 minus 7 is 8. So that's 7 left. 6 left. 5 left. 4 left. Just like so. So I've got 4 left here, so I'm thinking of just removing that, like that. So that just cancels out 4 from there, so we're at 9 and um, 11. So let's go ahead and fire this, shall we? I've kind of explained triangling, but here it's got a little bit more relevance because it's actually our barrel that we're looking at now, not so much the sand comp boosters. So it's kind of hard to picture this, but imagine your TNT or your sand, let's use sand in this instance, is kind of hitting the trapdoor. Let's just put it here for now. As you can see, it's got 3 components of velocity. So it's got a y component, as you can see by the difference in the heights. It's got a Z component, which is north to south, as you can see by the difference in the north to south. And it's got an X component, which we haven't really looked at yet, which is a difference in east to west, which you can clearly see. This one's left of this one. What does that mean? Well, now we've got to factor in 3 components rather than 2 into our barrel design. So um, we've discovered that entities render their y velocity first, which means that they're just going to keep going up and up and up until they hit something or they run out of velocity. Let's say they hit something like our guider. They're now going to render their x velocity, so y then x, which is east to west. So as you can see, this direction's west, so now it's going to move across this way, as you can see by the power shooting it this way. And that's going to do the same thing. It's going to keep going until it hits something or it runs out of velocity. Now it's going to render its z-axis, which is north to south. Obviously, by the look of this barrel, we're going to be shooting north in this direction. So it's going to come out this way and hit our wall, just like that. So we're going to see this happen right now, which should be very good. Let's get a web involved. And you may be wondering also, what's the point of a 120 stacker? Why not just make it a 255? Well, on most faction servers now, people are scamming in their cannons or like printing in their cannons at quite low Y levels. So maybe Y100, that's where they're scamming it in. So 120 is really the perfect height. I know for a fact when I'm raiding, I'm putting my barrels and my cannon at like Y110. And this is just so quick and easy to print in. As you can see, it's probably about a half or even a third of the size of a regular cannon. And it does the same thing. So this is ideal for small raids or countering into a counter cannon. Into a cannon box, sorry. So yeah, so we can go ahead and test fire this now. Let's give it a button press. You should see our sand will shoot up very nicely into this block. So, yep, so let's check it's all here. Check the entities, 120 out of 121, which is exactly what we want. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so now we're going to have to shoot it at something. So obviously the reason you're here is you guys play factions, so I don't have to explain that you can't break shit in enemy factions territories, which is why you have to cannon. So let's have a look at this. As you will see, the sand comp doesn't stack the sand. It just falls in one big blob and might stack 2 sand if you're lucky. Nah, it just stacks 1 sand and that's it. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at how do we stack this sand now. So we've got it all shooting out and hitting here, but we want to stack it so it creates a nice platform for us to break the wall. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the power part 2 section of the video, and I'll catch you guys next time.